Boardroom Bound, episode 143, a deep dive into the board application with Janelle Brittain.
One of the most common mistakes a board candidate makes is that they assume that just putting your information together and putting it out there is going to do it for you. There is another important aspect of this journey that you should have already done, hopefully, and that is that you have built yourself in your career to be a thought leader in your field.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry. This is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's show, we're speaking with Janelle Brittain. And Janelle is someone who has been involved for 40 years in a variety of different board experiences, from coaching and guiding, mentoring, and helping others. And she's going to advise us through the process of presenting yourself for a board opportunity and helping you to make sure that you can be the best match for a board. And she's worked with over 90 people and also lots of different organizations. She sits on multiple sides of the table, from coaching people to running the board searches to helping boards with interventions. You're going to hear all of that come through today, and an expert talk through almost on a step-by-step level exactly what you need to do to present yourself and be a successful candidate. I'm excited to take you through the show today. Let's jump into it. Before we jump into today's show, I'd like to share a message from our sponsor about director certification. Want to join your first board, or are you looking for additional board seat opportunities? In either scenario, be sure to be disciplined in your approach. Now, through the Becoming an Exceptional Board Director Candidate Coaching and Certification course, you get both modern board director candidate packaging and modern board operations knowledge integrated within one program. Remember, the key to landing additional or your first board seat is in your packaging. Make the effort to do it right. Program graduates also receive their globally recognized International Board Director Competency Designation upon course completion. It's designed for individuals and groups. You can learn more at bit.ly/IBDC-D. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/IBCDC-D. And now let's jump into the show. Janelle Brittain, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Alexander, I'm very pleased to be with you here today. Your show is providing a very important service for people who are on boards and for those who are seeking to get on boards, because that is a unique part of the business environment that not too many people know a lot about.
Well, I'm excited to have you on to share with us today, Janelle, for a variety of reasons. Obviously, with your 40 years of experience in a variety of types of boards and the coaching that you do for a lot of people. Plus, you and I were joking about this beforehand. You were part of Boardroom Bound before it was my podcast. You were the original Boardroom Bound, if we talk about it that way. And I'm sure we'll have some fun sharing that today. So I'm excited for what you're going to bring knowledge-wise to our guests today. And I know it's going to be a great show, but I get too excited and I always want to jump right in. I need to slow down and stop and give you a chance. Help us understand to be the person you are today, where you are coaching and guiding executives and others on preparing for board space, because that takes time to build up those credentials and that experience. How did it begin for you?
I am a management and leadership coach, trainer, and consultant. That was the foundation of my work 31 years ago when I founded my company, Dynamic Performance Institute. But I did get frustrated in working at the C-suite in that I really felt I couldn't have the tone at the top impact that I could have if I was to work with boards. And I was serving on nonprofit boards at the time and thought I need to accelerate up to corporate boards as well. So over these years, I have served on a lot of different types of boards. I find it challenging, stimulating, sometimes frustrating, but very, very meaningful, because it takes all of the work experience that you have built up over the years and applies it at a very strategic level. Now, the other aspect of my work is I am a board consultant, coach, and trainer, which means that I do board assessments, I do board interventions when there are challenges. I do strategic planning with boards, onboarding, and a variety of other areas. So I am talking with boards and people who are on boards all the time. In addition to that, I have done board candidate searches for companies. So I look at it from that point of view. And then with Boardroom Bound that you mentioned. Boardroom Bound was originally founded by Linda Bolliger back in about 2001. And as she was feeling frustrated with women not getting on corporate boards, women and minorities, she founded that organization with that goal in mind. Now, the problem was, not only was it difficult for women and minorities to get on boards, but we really didn't know what it takes to get on board. So we had to study it. And through that, and she brought me on to be the director of what we call the Boardology Institute, which I think is a great phrase. I designed training programs and I designed coaching to help executives make that transition. And I will tell you, from the heart side of things, one of the most rewarding aspects of doing that work with women and minorities was that many of these top-level, highly competent executives had never thought that they could be a board director, that other people had been coached that throughout their career, that they had not, and as that opened up to them, it opened up a whole other additional aspect of their career and their life. So then, when Boardroom Bound was closed, when the founder retired, InTouch came along, and InTouch Network and brought me on to do a similar kind of thing, and then I do executive coaching, helping executives down this board journey, and then also have created a 7-week training program that we call Boards Be Ahead of the Curve that helps to build a strategy and also helps to build effective board directors once you're on.
Well, then that is a perfect lead-in for some of the stuff that I would love to share with our audience today, tapping into that expertise about you advising us through the process of presenting yourself for board opportunity and about how to make sure you're the best match, right? Because I think this is something that we can probably also sort of take for granted of, like, this will happen later. First, I've got to do the networking and put myself out there. But there's probably things that we need to do in the beginning that really make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. So, for example, if an executive is putting their information together to submit for an opportunity, that is probably, if it's their first board experience, something very different than what they're used to doing, right?
Absolutely. And even before that, one of the most common mistakes a board candidate makes is that they assume that just putting your information together and putting it out there is going to do it for you. There is another important aspect of this journey that you should have already done, hopefully, and that is that you have built yourself in your career to be a thought leader in your field. I hope that you will have written articles in your industry or for professional magazines, or that you have spoken at professional association meetings. However, as I coach executives, many of them say, well, I have been so focused on my career and my family that I've not had time to do those kinds of things. So, okay, if that's the case, then I would suggest that a person start now. And in today's LinkedIn world, there's an easy way to start that, to build your credibility, to build your reputation as a thought leader. And that is to publish short articles on LinkedIn to professional groups that you are a member of, and board groups that you may want to join on LinkedIn. And also know that they are going to be checking you out on Google. When was the last time you Googled yourself? How many other people have the same name as you, and they might mistake that person for you?
Well, it's a big difference if you're, say, a John Doe versus a very unique name, but even a unique name, right? So it's not only the written stuff that shows up, but any videos that you've been in, any podcast recordings, things like that. It can show up in sort of different types of formats.
Absolutely. There are so many now. So check all of those. and make sure that your reputation and your credibility that you've created is an important representation, an accurate representation of you. So now, let's say you know of an opportunity. For instance, with In Touch, we post opportunities all the time. So you say, okay, well, I'm going to apply for that. Please don't make the common mistake that a lot of people make, is that they have a cover letter that they use for everybody. They're busy. They don't have time to customize it. I'd say, if you don't have time to customize it, you don't have time for this job. That you need to really look at the company, research the company, and really ask yourself questions about, is this the right kind of company that I want to be on a board of? I never recommend that you take just any old board position just to get some experience. I think you need to think it through a lot more deeply, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But anyway, so you need to have a customized cover letter. People say, but I hate to write cover letters. Okay, how do I do that?
I think that's a fair answer for everybody to say, yeah.
I know. So my suggestion is pretty simple. Keep it simple. The first paragraph should be something that you appreciate about the company, that shows that you've researched them, something you respect about them, their accomplishments, that kind of thing. And then pull out the description of what it is they're looking for and compare that to your competencies. And choose 2 or 3 of what they're asking for that match with your competencies and put them into the letter as bullets, short, to the point, because they're going to be scanning this. They're going to be getting a lot of different applicants. So you want it to stand out quickly. And then have a short ending paragraph. And in that ending paragraph, it's what I call the passion paragraph, or the heart part of the communication, that lets them know your great interest in this company or in this industry, because you need to have that. When the company is going through tough times, you've got to really care about them. And this is the place where you would share that. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's interesting to think about, you can imagine various size stacks for the type of board positioner coming in, of people that probably the large one of everybody coming in. And there's a short stack that they actually perhaps scanned enough, thought this is interesting enough, we'll look at the pile and actually do a deep dive into you and the rest of your credentials. Is that the way that you're recommending it?
Absolutely. And you want to be on that short stack. I call it the short list. Absolutely. So how can you get there as you go through this process? Some people will put together a board resume or board bio. Other people simply submit their CV, their standard, in-depth, detail-oriented CV. So imagine that you are the head of the nominating committee of board, and you have this 7-page CV, and sitting next to somebody who has a 1-page targeted board resume. Which one are you going to look at?
Well, imagine the CV shows you do not know what you're applying for because it's the wrong type of resume.
Exactly. When I'm working with executives about this, I advocate that a board resume or bio be only 1 page. But they say, well, how can you summarize all of what I have done in this career in 1 page? That's because we are going to look at your career from 30,000 feet up and look down at all of what it is you have done and how that has built up a strategic view of how you can look at companies and companies' problems. Now, also, what is the difference between a board resume and a board bio? I throw both of those around. I view that there's some difference. A board bio is more of a narrative. It is the story about you. And quite frankly, that is what we always used to do. In today's world, people are in much more of a hurry. So we have adapted and now doing more board resumes, which has more bullets, a quicker read. So that is my current recommendation, is more of the board resume approach. And also, just know, they will get your CV later if they're interested in you. So they will find out the details, so don't worry about that.
And, one quick point to come back to, because I think it might tie in. You were talking about if you're not, say, not already a writer, a speaker, if you're not building what I would call a position of authority in a subject matter area of expertise, it's something you need to do. But this clearly would tie in with the documents that you're talking about here. So in your board bio, in your one-page board resume, where it's not about the stuff that you delivered, it's showing who you are as a person to generate their interest. Let's say you're a chief HR officer, which is such a buzz now in boards and clearly more respected than ever before based on what's happened from the pandemic. That is the type of information that's going to bubble more up to the surface to see who you are and how you differentiate yourself. Is that right?
Exactly. And what you just did there, Alexander, was you looked at a person from the board's point of view and what they want, what's important to them. And at different times, there are different skills that a board may be looking for. And right now, there are certain areas that a lot of boards are looking for in competencies. One is turnaround ability. Look at what happened to so many companies right now. So if you have done any of that in your career, you definitely want to bring that to the forefront. Risk analysis is really important. Risk analysis used to be a small segment. Now risk analysis covers the entire company and even into the brand and reputation, so it includes marketing as well. And then, of course, there's cyber risk. They're looking for many more subject matter experts. For example, Amazon just brought on the U.S. commander onto their board. He's the commander over cybersecurity. That is showing you how important that is. So it's taking the issues of the day that boards are interested in. Other ones are data analysis, AI, ESG, or environmental, societal, governmental issues and how to address them. Compensation and benefits. That's a fast-changing arena. You mentioned HR. And when I'm working with an HR person, for instance, HR, usually they're generalists. When we're talking about board, we take that part of the HR function that has to do with board, like compensation and benefits, leadership development, those two in particular, and bring those more to the forefront. You see what I'm speaking of here?
Absolutely. Yep. So then if someone is beginning to figure out, okay, I need to share, and I guess the easiest way to explain it is when you're applying for the job, you're speaking to the hiring manager. You're solving their problem because that's how they can picture you in the seat and they want to hire you. A board role is no different, just the way you're explaining and expressing it is very different. It's as simple as that, right?
Yes, it is. It's making that shift from executive language to board language. Mm-hmm. So people say, well, how do I speak board language? A couple of ways. Listen to podcasts like this so that you learn about the issues, and you'll start to pick up the areas of focus and the language. Subscribe to e-newsletters, magazines, all have to do with board. And I'll give you a few other examples. Like board language would be focused on just your accomplishments, the outcomes, not the title and the responsibility, which is not to say that you can't mention the title. I've had some executives who they want to list all of the titles that they've had on a board resume, 2 or 3 of your top titles, especially that relate to what they're asking for. And then talk about not just the responsibilities, but the outcomes. And don't use terms like project management. And I understand that in today's world, project management can be huge. But that says management. Don't you hear that? Even in the term.
Right.
Some use references to the number of people that they have as direct reports. No, not from the board point of view. We don't need to know that. So it's more like business. I have helped a business grow by X%. I have led the divestiture strategy, a risk analysis and decision making. Helped lead led a turnaround, led international acquisitions, those kinds of things.
So that makes a lot of sense. And That's hard for CEOs or anyone in the C-suite probably. It's a giant change because they got there probably by being successful and by doing, right? Whereas the boardroom is noses in, fingers out. So very different philosophy. And that's what you're communicating to someone as you're getting across, writing it in the way that you are, is that I know I've been there and I've done that, but I can be at the next level to help coach, guide, and develop the people below me to help the organization because I know that I'm looking after the shareholders and the stakeholders.
That's one of the biggest complaints I get from board directors is that a new executive gets onto a corporate board and they have not made that switch mentally. That they are still thinking that they have the authority, power that you have as an executive where you can command people around to do things. On a board, it is a team. And you must switch on your diplomacy, your persuasive skills in order to persuade the other board members of your point of whatever that is, and to persuade the CEO and sometimes the executive staff of a strategy, of things approaches to take. And that requires another set of skills that some more command and control type of executives have to develop.
And I imagine we might see that changing. I mean, historically, if we go back several decades, the people on boards were sitting and retired CEOs. And then they expanded and became sitting retired CFOs. And that was basically the qualification to be in the room. And now I think there's a general assumption if you are in the C-suite, and depending on how large your organization, you might be a division leader in the C-suite because those are massive organizations at times. You are probably qualified and ready to be in the boardroom for the most part. And perhaps not having as many, say, CEOs around the boardroom table, and you've got other people with great experience and skill set, might begin to change some of that dynamic and experience. I wonder if you have any insights into that, Janelle.
Absolutely. That is a definite, very strong trend these days. Boards are realizing that it's not such a great idea to have a boardroom filled with CEOs, all with ideas about how to run the whole company. That in order to handle the complexities and the major problems, the new kinds of problems we've never had before, how many CEOs know how to handle a cyber risk or really know a lot about big data and data analysis? They don't. We need to have on the boards people who know the right questions to ask, the kinds of precautions that we need to make, the kind of accountability that we need that we never had to have before, that will really help to save a company in its future. In addition to that, boards of the future are going to be changing and how they look, and they have been changing, but very, very slowly regarding diversity. I mentioned earlier about working with Boardroom Bound. We've come, I can't say a long way. We have made progress over these 19 or 20 years. And I'm embarrassed to say that the United States, which is where I'm from, is a laggard in board diversity worldwide. BoardX recently shared some research that they did comparing 27 different countries and how they are with gender diversity, with getting women on boards. The U.S. is 18th out of 27, which is, I think, embarrassing. Now, that is for public company boards. That's not even counting private companies. And the hypothesis is, or the expectations are, that private companies are even worse. The top four countries with the greatest amount of women on their public boards are France, Sweden, Norway, and Italy. And the bottom three are Brazil, Russia, and Japan. And you might ask, well, what is the difference between those who have greater numbers of women on their boards versus those that don't? One of the variables is that they have quotas, usually between 30 and 40% expectation.
That's interesting. I'm part of the 2020 Women on Boards movement, and they're celebrating the anniversary this year, the 10th years. And last year, they just sort of got over that 20% mark. And here they've done it with more of the larger indices moving into more company space. Again, mostly public companies that we're measuring here. But it is the year where they've now gotten the 20%. It's 2020. So clearly the target and the name of the organization will be changing to grow for the future. And the discussion is more of parity rather than a percentage now. And obviously, that's just gender. There are so many more ways you think about diversity on a board, from socioeconomic background, ethnicity, lots of different perspectives, so that we get the diversity of thought that we need in the boardroom.
Absolutely. Diversity statistics, blacks and other minorities is even worse. I don't have a whole lot of that right here, but however, I will tell you that I am a little more hopeful today because just recently, some large companies put together what they call the Board Challenge. And it was founded by 17 companies where they are making a commitment that they will all have at least one black board member by the end of 2021, and they are soliciting many other companies to join them. So if there are any executives of large companies listening, I hope that you will join the Board Challenge. It's interesting, Dennis Chakazian, a colleague of mine, he has been he has been on 80 corporate boards.
Wow.
Obviously, a huge depth of experience. And as he looks back at all of that, he says it takes something really bad to happen to make a change happen. Where we are right now with our race relations and race consciousness, it's that kick in the gut that sometimes it takes for us as a population to really start to make some changes. So I have a little hope there.
Well, in that sense, we never want to waste a crisis. I don't want to make it too glib, but an opportunity for change,
No.
as you say. And then let's use that part of the discussion to say, so if now people are saying, right, I see an opportunity. I am a person who can be a candidate for this role. I want to put myself up. I want to be one of the finalists, someone that they actually look at and see and consider. What are sort of the top tips for how someone does that? And maybe there's some differences between, say, a public versus a private company in that process.
Yes, there are. It can be a very different process. A public company, they are looking usually for someone who's already proven themselves. That means that they often are looking for somebody who's already been on a private company board. They are having more pressure from investor groups, stock trading platforms to truly be more diverse. So obviously they're looking for diverse candidates more. But that process with the public company is a much longer process, much more in-depth. As a matter of fact, I have one woman I'm coaching who has been on 9 private company boards. Now she wants to be on a public company board. And she is feeling the frustration of what it's like to go through the process for a public company board position. It usually takes 6, 9, 12 months, and sometimes even a bit more, because they know when somebody's going to be retiring. They start planning well in advance. You go through a lot of different interviews. They ask for a lot of information, filling out a lot of forms, a lot of background as you go through the process. You just have to take a breath and be patient to get through the process. Now, in the private sector, it's very different. It depends. I'm going to take it to the other extreme. Let's say that this will be your first corporate board, and you're interested in being on a young company's board, a startup board even. On a startup company, you'll be working with the founder right away, the CEO, and they usually make decisions quick. They shoot from the hip. They're fast-paced. It may be one interview and you're on. So it's from one extreme to another. Now, on the in-between in other private companies, let's take a family-owned company. You will probably meet first with the founder, the head of the family, the CEO, and have more of chemistry is really, really important in a family-owned company. So they may start, like they used to in the olden days, start with a lunch. Now, we're not doing that so much now, but a conversation versus getting into the nitty-gritty, because that chemistry is so important. Now, if it's a company that has investors like private equity or VCs, they're interested in the bottom line. They want to get somebody who's going to get in there and help to either turn around the company or make it grow really fast. So they will be having a lot of conversations with you and looking for the proof of your ability to do those kinds of things. So as you see, it's a different path, it's a different conversation with different kinds of companies.
And that makes a lot of sense, and that is helpful for people as they think about which type of experience that they're going after. But I imagine we might be able to extract even more about, say, the interview part of the process and the advice that you would have.
On the interviews, be prepared. Really learn everything you can about the company. If it's a public company, obviously you can go on the internet, look at all of their governance documents. And in governance documents, they will tell you even more about what they're looking for. As you're going through that interview process, I urge you not to just think of it in terms of they are looking for you, but you are looking for them as a best match for you. This takes a lot of time to be on a board. They give a variety of statistics of numbers of hours, 200 hours a year, 250, 300. It depends on the health of the company, quite frankly, and the maturation stage of the company. But as you're going through the interview process, you ask them questions too, to make sure that you're going to be comfortable with this kind of company. For instance, do they have the kinds of values you have? So if they dump pollutants into a nearby river, how do you feel about that? If they market e-cigarettes to young people, how do you feel about that? Or culture. You want to find out about their culture. Is it a fast-paced, intense culture? They make decisions quickly? Or is it a low risk-taker, slow and methodical in their decision-making kind of a company? Are they fast growth, a lot of M&A, or gradual organic growth that proves it over time? What's going to work for you? And again, I always like to talk about the best match, which is the two of you, the company and you. And also think about... Oh, sure, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that comes back to something you said at the very beginning, Janelle. You're talking about some of the work you do as board interventions, which implies that some boards have problems. And I think that comes up, it's almost like dating, right? You want to make sure that it's a fit, that it's going to be successful going forward. And I think that fits with the point you said, don't take the first board opportunity you get, wait for the one that's the right match for you so that you can be successful, especially because if you are, that's what is most likely to lead to more board opportunities.
Absolutely. And again, if you are enjoying it, that the stimulation of it, the people sitting around the table, sharing those great ideas and solving problems together, the chemistry and the juice of it all is what feeds us intellectually so that we get something out of it. And that's an important part of our life. And then that makes us want to have another board. But also, I would give you guidance that if you're on a board and it does not feel right, if you have concerns about where the board is going, whether it's values, ethics, or really bad decisions, you need to be willing to walk. Let it go. Don't make it so that the income from being on that board is what you need in order to put bread on your table. View it as an extra. View it because you want to give back in this way and leverage the wisdom that you have gained over all of these years in your career.
Well, Janelle, there has been so much actionable advice you've given us to our audience today, and I appreciate that. As I try to think, how do we bring all of this together to wrap it up? I guess I'm going to pick up on the words you just used. You were talking about best match. And how do we give advice for our audience about how making sure that they're the best match in order to be the finalist who's selected?
Examine yourself, reflect on what's important to you, examine them, and see what's important to them. Ask questions both ways and have patience. This is a journey. So many times I talk to executives and they say, oh, well, I want a board position in 3 months. It's not like getting a job.
It's possible, but not likely.
Yes, right. And I will tell you, if you're in touch, people have been getting board positions a lot faster than, quite frankly, I was used to before. So times they are changing, but it also depends on what you're looking for and what level of company. So again, if you're looking for a public company board, the best match there is you have to be patient and already have some experience on being on boards. But if you are interested in a young startup, the best match for you is that juiciness and the excitement of all of the entrepreneurial aspects of a startup. That's your best match. So reflect on what you enjoy, what you need, and the company and what it needs.
Well, Janelle, I think this has been wonderful advice that our audience can just pick up today, almost as a checklist of do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and walk through it. And we were just delighted to have you on the show today, especially since you've been involved with Boardroom Bound before the podcast was even born. So thank you for sharing your insights and helping all of us to be Boardroom Bound. That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Janelle Brittain. You could tell she has done this so many times in coaching and preparing people to be the best candidate to stand out and be successful in their board search. So I'd encourage you to use today almost like a checklist. You can go step by step. Here's what I need to do in order to bring myself into that candidacy and be successful. Now, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you will find links to everything that we discussed today. And please know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content that we're bringing to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.